Okay, so we're going to try this again and see if I can go live. Let's see. Let's test to see if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. Hopefully, people can find me over here because I had to delete the other stream. And hopefully, you will let me know in the comments if you can hear me or not. Okay, here y'all are. Sound is back. Um, my computer is still telling me that the connection is unstable, so I don't know what's going on with that. I am hardwired. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you, but y'all can hear me. You're back, so we will proceed. And I will introduce myself. Hello, my name is Adelia Borishade, and I am a financial educator based in Mexico City, where I have been living for the last 3.5 years. Um, I have been living abroad for the last 6.5 years, and I have made it kind of my life's work to help Black women develop financial confidence so that they can pursue their dreams and live the life they want on their terms, whether that means traveling. Whether that means moving abroad or doing really whatever it is they feel like doing. So, here on this channel, we talk all about travel, solo travel in particular. We talk about life abroad. We talk about money, which is what we're going to do tonight. So if you're new here, please subscribe, turn on not subscriptions, notifications, so that when I go live, you will get a notification and you can come join the party or when I post a pre-recorded video, which I have done from time to time. So here we are tonight. As those of you who are here normally know, I'm trying to figure out what this light situation is. I am not home in Mexico City. I am on the road this week. I am in the Bay Area of California. And so Auntie Lou was wondering if it is raining. Actually, no. I know they had a lot of bad weather previously, but the weather has been great for the few days that we have been here. So I'm here helping my friend clean out her storage unit. And so that's what I'm doing. But that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. Tonight, we're here to talk about some of the different problems and pitfalls that we can succumb to when we are living outside the US. Um, so yeah, I'm curious because like I've put together my list of some of the problems and some of the issues that I think people need to be aware of, but I am curious for those of you that have either moved abroad, moved outside the US, or you travel long term, kind of digital nomad lifestyle, bop around. What are some of the financial issues that you have had to deal with? Um, so, because you may have experienced something that did not make my list. So, I am curious. Please feel free to share those in the chat, and we will get started. Um, when I shared that we would be going live tonight and that this is the topic we would be discussing in the Exodus Summit Facebook group of if you're not a member and you are a Black woman who wants to travel, who wants to take a sabbatical, who wants to move abroad, you should definitely join the Exodus Summit Facebook group. It's a great place, a great community. Well, when I posted that we were doing this video in that group, um, one of the women were like, I was in Mexico and I ended up spending twice the amount of money that I had bargained for. And somebody else commented, um, that, yeah, Mexico is cheap. Cheap where? And that's actually the first thing that's on my list tonight is, well, before we get to my list, remember, y'all, I'm a financial educator, not a financial advisor, not a financial planner. I am not licensed to give anybody financial advice. This is not what this is. This is meant for education and entertainment purposes only. Okay. So, first thing on my list is spending money like you are on vacation. Traveling as a digital nomad kind of lifestyle is very different than traveling like you're on vacation. Vacations tend to be very short. And so we might be inclined maybe not to track our spending as much as we normally would. We might splurge on things we normally would not splurge on, which could lead to us spending far more than we anticipated, um, especially if you are actually like living your regular everyday life outside the US and you are spending money the way you do. Because, come on, let's be real. When we're on vacation, are we really that concerned about prices? A lot of times it's like, look, I'm just here, I'm just chilling. Um, yes, another round of margaritas for everybody. Oh, of course, you add dessert, that sort of thing. Often when we are on vacation, uh, spending money and still in the mindset of, oh, well, back home, this would cost me X amount of money. It's not that expensive. And so just going for it. So, yeah, spending money the way you do on vacation. That is that's that's a pitfall, especially when I see this a lot with brand new expats, like people who just left the US, that the first few months, and they're spending money the way they would on vacation. And that could be very problematic when they're trying to stay abroad for a longer term. Like that's probably not going to be sustainable. Okay. Um, and I know I when I come back off of vacation, sometimes I will look at my credit card bill and I'm like, "Girl, what were you doing? You can't spend money like that every day." So that is one of the financial pitfalls that we can fall prey to as we are living outside the U.S. Um, some of the other issues deal more with sort of longer term topics. Um, I think a lot of the conversation about moving abroad tends to be focused on how do I get there? How do I get out of the US? How do I get into my new country? There's not as much conversation as I'd like to see happening about the impact on your finances when you live outside the US long term. And that's, I'm speaking about things like retirement, Social Security. So we'll talk about those as well. Okay, just looking at the comments. Comfort says, I'm always on budget on vacation. I need to stay on budget at home. And see, I will speak for myself. I tend to be the opposite. Um, I take a lot of care in finding the most affordable flight, taking care, comparing prices when I'm picking accommodations, all of that stuff before I get there. But once I'm in the destination, I'm not thinking about anybody's budget. I just I I spend money on vibes, And most of the time that's okay. But and that again, like I said, for a vacation, doing that short term, that's fine. But you can't be like that long term. Okay. Oh, this is good, Ballerina. Making sure your credit card monthly bill is paid while you're traveling for an extended period so you can keep using it. It's very easy to, especially for me, to, time seems to sort of lose its meaning. Um, you know, you look up and you're like, oh, it's the 15th, not realizing, yeah, you were supposed to pay your credit card bill on the 15th, because you get so caught up in what you're doing. Okay, so some of the longer term um, financial pitfalls that people don't really think about too much, or maybe they are thinking about them, and but we're just not having the conversations about them in that same way. Um, One of the things that if you are considering moving abroad, I have a move abroad checklist, and this is one of the things on my checklist is about how difficult it is often for particularly US citizens trying to bank outside the US, access their accounts. We've discussed that the IRS is very concerned that those of us who live outside the US are going to try and hide assets so that we don't pay um, income tax on it. And the resulting legislation has made it kind of a pain in the butt for bank financial institutions to deal with Americans. There's a much higher burden of paperwork when dealing with an American. And it's gotten to the point that a lot of financial institutions will just be like, oh, you're an American? No, we won't open an account for you. Or once they find out you're abroad, they don't want to deal with you and they will close your account. So, in my move abroad checklist, um, one of the things that I encourage you to do as you prepare to move abroad is to open various kinds of accounts while you are still in the US. It'll be a whole lot easier, let's say, to open an investment account, a brokerage account while you're still in the US versus trying to do that outside of the US. So, if you are planning a move abroad, you're considering it, you are unsure of where to start, grab the checklist. Carla says that the checklist is excellent. It will probably get you to think about some things that maybe you hadn't considered. So, um, there is a link to the checklist in the description of this video. So, um, sorry, y'all. Every time I click something, the computer moves. Sorry about that. Trying to turn this off. Okay, meanwhile, the wealthy are definitely hiding assets outside the US even while living here. Yeah, like the 4 nickels I have, I don't know why Uncle Sam wants to harass me about those, when there are people who really are. But unfortunately, us regular folks with 4 and 5 nickels now have to deal with the paperwork situation because of those folks with real money who are trying to hide it. Um so yeah. So the thing to consider is if you are going to live abroad longer term, particularly if you are going to kind of live a digital nomad sort of lifestyle where you bop around, you really need to give some thought to your banking setup. Choosing a bank while you are stateside that is going to be friendly to somebody who spends a lot of time outside the US, figuring out sort of How am I going to be able to access my money in the most economical way possible? It's now a problem with the accounts because we are now more aware. Yeah. Okay, so Alex P. Keaton already got it. I've been with Fidelity Investments for 15 years, including my checking, no ATM fees for withdrawals. Yeah, I will say that Fidelity, I have, knock on wood, have not really had any issues with them. At one point, I even had my foreign mailing address as my address of record. And they were like, yeah, as long as you don't go to like these 3 or 4 countries, um, there should not be any problem. But that is something to consider. Often, there are people who, are so happy to get out of the US. They sort of cut all of their ties. They get rid of any local address they have, which could make it problematic when you need to open a bank account or something like that. Um, so, yeah, that is something to consider and be cognizant of, that financial institutions may give you a hard time. I'm seeing a lot in the Mexico Facebook groups that foreigners are in where they're talking about, like, I've got my residency, I want to go open a bank account. And the banks are, like, giving them the runaround. Even though they've got all the required documentation, in theory, it should be a simple thing. You have the documentation, here is your account, but they are getting banks that are like, no, giving them some kinda trumped up reason why they don't wanna deal with them. But it could very well be that because they are Americans and it's such an extra hassle to deal with them that they, because of the paperwork, the additional paperwork that they have to file. Look, if y'all aren't willing to do this, um, we're gonna make life difficult for you. For a lot of them, it's just easier to be like, okay, we won't open accounts for Americans. So, something to think about. Okay. I would love World Remit, which has cash pickup in most places, any bank in many countries. Yeah. Uh, Remitly does that. I think you can do it with MoneyGram. I'm not sure if Zoom, XOOM, which is a PayPal company, I'm not sure if they let you do cash pickup. But yeah, something to think about. Abroad Ability says waiting 3 weeks for a check to clear is an adjustment for me here in Panama. So are those ATM fees. The checklist is a must. I'm curious. They are, um, do people in Panama use checks? Or is it for when someone is paying you by check elsewhere and having it deposited to your Panamanian account? Um, because I really am wondering, um, how much how much longer are we going to talk about checks and they be something people know about? Like, we talk about dialing a phone, but nobody uses rotary phones anymore. Are checks on the way to where rotary phones are? I do wonder about that. I do wonder. If anyone is planning to open a bank account in Jamaica, you'll make 3 to 5 trips to the bank before it's completed. That is something else that I am hearing a lot. So, something to consider. Okay. Um, Now, the next thing on my list is student loans. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you know how I feel about student loan debt as an impediment to you moving abroad. I do not believe student loan debt should be an impediment to moving abroad if that's what you so choose. But I do think you need to approach that situation strategically. I know there are a lot of people who have student loan debt and they're like, look, I've made my peace. I'm not paying those loans back. And they just walk away and they're like, they're not going to come for me in, uh, I'm moving to Ghana. They're not going to come for me in Ghana about my student loan debt. And you're probably right. They aren't. Um, but I think people choose that particular route, assuming that they're never going to return to the US. And if you simply walk away from your student loan debt, if you simply walk away from it, and then you find that there is a reason that you have to return to the US, it could be problematic. Um, because, if it's federal student loans, there could be a situation where they're garnishing wages. If you're returning to the US and you find yourself in need of credit for some reason, whether it's to get utilities turned on, to get a car loan, it could hamper things that way. So I would definitely say don't take that route of just walking away unless you are 1000% certain that there is nothing in your life that could ever happen to make you come back. Okay, because there are better options. Um, what happened to the student loan forgiveness bill that was proposed? Last I heard, there were several states, including my home state of Texas, who were suing, arguing that by wiping out student loan debt, it would be detrimental to some of the loan processors, and that was not allowable under the law. So it's being held up in court. How Joe is going to proceed, how's he going to find a way to work around it? I don't know. I don't know. So um, they could come for that US passport. Technically, they can already. If you owe an excessive amount of back taxes, and at the moment, last time I checked, an excessive amount was considered to be $50,000, they can seize your passport. I don't know how student loans might figure into that, but something to consider. Um, So I said the best option wouldn't be to just walk away from the student loans. It would be a better idea to pursue financial based re- income based repayment would be a better option. And the reason I say that that would be a better option is if you get on to an income-based repayment plan, the amount you have to pay, your monthly payment, is based on a formula about how much money you make. Living outside the US and exempting your income under the foreign earned income exemption, which I did a video on, but I did not think far enough ahead to include a link. So, for those of you who are watching this replay in the future, there should be a link to that video I did on the foreign earned income exclusion in the description. But basically, if you live outside the United States for the vast majority of the year, you can exempt your income because you're not in the US. And what that means is for tax purposes, you have zero income. And if you think about it and you're on an income based repayment plan, but according to your taxes, you have no income. Therefore, your student loan payment is zero. And so, if in the event you find that you need to return to the US, you're not walking back into a situation where you've allowed the loans to completely ruin your credit situation, if indeed you need that as a part of your return to the US. Okay. So that's what I think would be a better option um if student loans are planning for student loans are part of your planning for your move out of the United States. Yeah, I think it's janky that Texas would sue, but not surprising at all. And if you are on disability, you can have your student loans forgiven. So I think that's the thing there is just not to walk away from the loans, because in the event you have to return to the US for any extended period of time and like live there, it's going to make your life that much harder. And we don't want to do that. Okay. All right. Going through the comments, I saw a question. Um, does one need a local bank account for their utility accounts when living abroad? Um, In my experience, the answer has been not really. I've lived in 4 different countries, um, well, technically 5 if you include the US, in Honduras, in Mexico, in China, and Kuwait. And basically, you can get by without having a bank account. In China, I would say that that was probably that would have been the hardest country to get buy-in without a local bank account, simply because you can't use credit cards to pay for things. All payment was either done in cash or done electronically through Alipay or WeChat Pay, which it would be so much easier in your life if that was linked to a bank account. When I first moved to China, I didn't I didn't remember that taking credit cards wasn't a thing. And so what I did was I got cash out of the ATM. I gave it to somebody I worked with, and they then sent that money to my WeChat or my Alipay account. And then I could use that to buy the things I needed. But most places you can probably get by without a local bank account. Mexico is definitely a place you can get by without a local bank account. Congratulations, Quinn Edwards. I got 18 months left on my is it public service loan forgiveness? Then I'm going to be joining y'all in Mexico. Congratulations. Because we've discussed on this channel enough how predatory I think student loans are. Um, y'all notice I didn't say anything about people having to pay off their student loans before they move abroad. I'm just saying, if you are moving abroad with student loan debt, do it strategically. Don't just walk away. Okay. The other thing, did I see a question for it? Um, okay, maybe I did not see a question. Um, One of the other kind of pitfalls, and I think this is, in my opinion, this is probably the bigger one, especially when we're talking about people living outside of the US long term, like whether you have a job that takes you outside the US and you spend 15 20 years working and then you plan on returning, or if the plan is I'm getting out of the US as soon as I can and I don't ever plan to come back, it is retirement, financial independence, um, how how you're going to arrive there when you're spending so many of your working years outside the US. Um, I don't hear enough conversations. I'm not going to say that there's no one talking about these things. Andrew Hallman, the millionaire teacher, this is something he talks about a lot. Um, but in a lot of the newer expat groups, the newer expat communities and circles online, I'm not hearing enough conversation about this. So that's why I wanted to talk about it on my channel, um, to make sure that people were aware. You know, if you are working outside the US, um, and you are not working for a US employer, because there are people who work outside the US, but they work for an American employer who is taking Social Security out of their checks. We're not talking about those people. So, like, I'll use myself as an example. I worked for a non-US employer in Mexico, in Honduras, in Kuwait, in China. That meant during those periods, I was not contributing to Social Security. Okay. So, what does that mean when it's time to retire? Quite possibly that there won't be any Social Security, or that if I had Social Security credits prior to my move abroad, um, are those gonna be enough to qualify me for benefits? You know, things to consider. Especially if you know of younger people, somebody in their 20s, somebody in their 30s who are leaving the US and will still be working and earning, but doing it outside the US. That's something to think about. Really, retirement saving is completely on them, the individual. Um, Social Security's funding issues aside, just the fact that they won't be contributing is something to think about. Okay. But what about if you do work for a US employer? Can I still claim the FEIE on my taxes? Hmm, that is an excellent question. Maybe, maybe. Remember, I am not a tax professional. I cannot give tax advice. But something to keep in mind is that FEIE is for federal taxes, not state level taxes. So there is a situation where you may, like I knew someone who taught in Bahrain, but the company that owned the school they worked at in Bahrain um, was based in the US. And so, I believe they were getting Social Security payments made um, for them by the employer, and they were able to take the FEIE at the federal level, but they still had a income tax obligation at the state level. So maybe. That's my answer. You'll have to dig a little bit more specifically into, like, where is your employer located? What state, um, do you pay state income tax to? Where are you domiciled? Because all of that could go into determining whether or not you could still claim the FEIE, along with the other rules about how much time you spend outside the US or whether you are a bona fide resident of another country. Yep, as a 28-year-old, I have to check and see if I'll even qualify, if we even have Social Security by the time I retire. So yeah, Social Security's viability, that's a whole separate issue. But for folks, particularly the folks in their under 40, um, and even some of the folks in their 40s, if you are not contributing to Social Security, Or so one, will you have enough credits to even get Social Security? And two, what will be the size of the benefit you receive? That means you have to make sure that you are doing something to offset that on your own. Um, Over the weekend, we wrapped up the first Get Started Investing challenge of the year. And this is one of the reasons that I host that challenge for Black women who are brand new to investing or maybe have done a little bit of investing through their job, let's say through their 401k, 403b, or 457 plan. That's one of the reasons I host that challenge is because of the potential of there not even being a Social Security that you can qualify for, or if you are going to be spending many of your prime earning years outside the US and not contributing to Social Security, you need to be able to offset that in some way. And so that is something to consider if you're thinking about living abroad long term is okay, what am I going to do to put money aside for, when I don't want to work anymore? If you want to call that retirement, you want to call that financial independence, whatever it is, um, that's something to consider. Is there a way to check your Social Security retirement credits? There is. They used to send in the mail. I don't know if they still do this. They used to send in the mail a thing that would tell you like as of right now, these are your credits, but you can go to the Social Security website and you can check that. Okay, Nubian Net says if you work out for an American company outside the US and your job is completely outside the US, it's not Social Security. I talked to people, they were eligible for unemployment. Um, Ivana, when she lived, Ivana Robinson, who is a frequent visitor to this YouTube channel. Um, when she worked for an international company, but she was initially part of the company that was based in the US. When they paid, that's who paid her salary while she lived in Belgium. And I know they contributed to Social Security for her. I wonder if she took the FEIE. I don't think she did. Um, so yeah, that's why I said maybe you got to ask some questions. Okay. Quinn Edwards says, got to do like the permanent RVers and change state of residency to a non-state income tax state like Texas before you move. That is definitely an option, but that may come with, some other issues. So yeah, definitely something to check into. Um, okay, Auntie Lou is 50. I plan on working a little income abroad, making a little income abroad, at least for the next 10 years so I can save a little nest egg. And that's the thing. I want there to be more conversation around this topic because again, like I said, I think a lot of the focus is on making the move abroad, getting abroad, but not thinking about, well, what does that mean? How does that change various financial things in my life? Often we just focus on the fact that, hey, I can afford to live the life I want in this other country, but not thinking about, well, what happens when I get to the point that I don't want to work anymore? Um, when do you plan to do the next investing challenge? That is an excellent question. Tentatively, we're looking at April or May, but I'm not sure, and I make no promises. Who knows? I could decide, hey, I want to do it in March. I don't know. March is unlikely because Ivana and I will be hosting Reclaim the Retreat in El Salvador in March, along with the fact that my birthday is in March and I already have two other trips planned in March. It's unlikely, so maybe April or May, but if I make no promises, okay, other than I will probably host the challenge again this year. And if that sounds like something you're interested in, get on the wait list. Those people are the first to know when registration opens. So I think there is a link in the description, or you can just go to pickygirltravels.thinkific.com and you can add yourself to the wait list for the Get Started Investing Challenge. And when I decide on the next date that I'm going to offer it, you will get an email. You'll get first crack at registering. Okay. Um, okay. For those of you that are considering doing a little geo arbitrage tax strategy, like setting up yourself in a non-income tax state before you leave the US, remember you may need to undomicile yourself in your prior state of residence. Don't it check both ways. Check the country you're going to, or the state you're going to. What do you have to do to become a tax resident there? What do you have to do to remove yourself from the previous state? It is going to vary by state, so you need to double check that. Um, I did a video that talks about that. It's called the 10 money moves to make before you move abroad. Again, I did not think far enough ahead to put a link in the description. And quite possibly, if you are watching this in the future, there is a description. I mean, there is a link in the description, quite possibly. Okay. Um, all right. So we were talking about that the burden of funding retirement could possibly fall more heavily on you if you are living outside the US long term. Um, you could, invest on your own. There are some things to consider when you are doing that. Depending on the country you live in, you may have the option of becoming part of whatever the local retirement scheme is. So, if let's say you had a residency in Portugal and you were working there, that might be possible for you to become part of the Portuguese retirement pension system or whatever it is called. That is something to consider. Okay, that often is going to depend on your residency status. So if you're a digital nomad, that may not be an option for you. It may also depend on your employer, because if you have a US employer, getting into the local system is usually not doable. Um, or you may have an employer that doesn't contribute to that. Depending on your job, like when I worked in Mexico, I know they were withholding taxes out of my check. Were they contributing to the Mexican retirement system for me? I don't know. Then there are, of course, all the rules with, like, how long do you have to work? How much do you have to contribute? So those are things to explore. But there are a lot of people who end up staying outside the US long term and in a single country long enough that it does make sense for them to, become a part of the local retirement program. Now, I will say a couple of things to think about. If the kind of work you do, like you get a job working in Korea, and you're there for a while and you're contributing to the Korean retirement program, whatever it's called, and then after 10, 15 years you leave. Okay. Are you able to take that money out? Do you have to forfeit that money? How does that work? If you return to the country you're originally from, there are lots of questions to be asked and answered um, when dealing with something like that. But something to keep in mind is, let's say you're an American, you're working in Korea, the whoever your employer is contributes to the Korean retirement thing, all of that. Life goes on, you start pulling your Korean retirement money. Uncle Sam may tax that. Okay, so that's some that as you're doing your planning and you're investigating, that's something else to consider. Don't make the assumption that, oh, certain kinds of retirement income are not taxed in the US or they are taxed in the US, and that's the rule for every country because that is not true. That's not true. Okay. And speaking of people who invest outside of the US, I really don't hear enough people talking about this, and so that's why I'm going to mention it. Whether you are investing in whatever the stock market situation is in your host country or like through your employer's retirement program on your own, what have you, something as an American citizen that you need to be concerned about is what's called a PFIC. And I am going to copy that text, hopefully, and I'm going to paste it in the chat. Okay. All right. And then I'm going to put it up here. Okay. So if you are investing or like you living in another country and you're like, hey, I want to get involved in stocks, mutual funds, what have you in this new country. As an American citizen, something you need to be concerned about is the passive foreign investment company. Now, what is this? One, you need to be concerned about it because the IRS tends to take a very punitive attitude toward PFICs. And that is any corporation like a mutual fund or something that's located abroad and either um, most of its income or assets are passive. So, like if you had a mutual fund that was based in Spain, that would be considered a PFIC, and how you would be taxed on the money you make from it would be far more punitive than how you would be taxed if you owned a mutual fund that was based in the US. Okay? Um, the US government doesn't want Americans deferring tax on passive income through non-US corporations. Uh, so basically, it's they don't want you to try and get around having to pay possible income or capital gains tax, and they are very, very punitive when it comes to that. So, yes. Yes, the IRS. So if you're going to invest in something outside of the US, maybe, and this might be the only time I ever say this, maybe individual stocks are a better way to go. But if you're thinking like, oh, I live in Japan, I'll just get a Japanese mutual fund, that is probably going to be considered a PFIC, and Uncle Sam is going to screw you over when it comes to the taxes. Just keep that in mind. Um, so yes, this is something you want to be aware of, a passive foreign investment company. Okay. Um, okay. And oh, I thought this was my last topic, but it isn't. Okay. So, we talked about like everyday banking. We talked about like, how you spend your money differently when you're on vacation than when you're not. Um, we talked about retirement. Okay, what happens if you are living outside the US and, it's your time to go? How do you make sure that the people you leave behind get the stuff that you want them to have, your assets that you've accumulated in this life that you've lived? Um, there's several videos or podcasts on this channel where we talk about wills and the importance of that. But there are some extra things. There are some extra things to consider. Okay, Auntie Trey. Yes, this is my little baby mic. If you saw me live on IG, I explained how I came to have this mic. This is not the mic I planned on using for this video, but if you were here earlier, we had um, a lot of technical hiccups and drama. Okay. Uh, a living irrevocable trust. Okay, maybe. Something you have to think about, especially the folks who are leaving the US and it is your intention not to ever come back, or you're planning on retiring. And a lot of people, especially Americans, they go to another country and they kind of move financially in much the same way that they did in the US. Like they buy property. Like, oh, why would I throw my money away on rent, which is not really throwing your money away, but that's a conversation for another day. But they move to another country, they buy a house, they buy a car, they have retirement accounts in that other country. Well, how how do you how do you get a will for that? How does that work? Does the will that you had drawn up in the US prior to leaving, is that going to work? Okay. There are a lot of questions here that I don't think people give enough thought. Okay. And this could have really big financial ramifications for you, the individual, but as well as your heirs. Okay. So let's talk about wills first. Okay. Um, get your will straight before you become a resident and know what the will laws are. Even Portugal has antiquated laws. That's the thing, guys. Okay, so you did what you were supposed to. In the US, you had a will drawn up. Does that will cover your property in another country? Maybe. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Um, there are three main questions that you need to find out the answer to. Is your US will considered a valid will in the foreign country for admission to probate or whatever their equivalent is? In the US, when someone passes away, there needs to be a succession situation determined, like who's going to get their stuff. That's either done in a probate court or a succession court, something like that. In this foreign country that you're living in, would your US will be valid there? That depends because it's a very specific thing that's very hard to talk about this in generalities. And so you'll need to dig into what are the um, will and inheritance laws specifically for this country you live in. Okay. Um, does then there's the other question, does the foreign country's legal system recognize the same rights as the US regarding your ability to list out who's getting what property? So in the US, in your will, there are certain things that you are allowed to say, like, this is how I'm giving out this is how I'm giving out that. Well, in the country that you're living in, are those kinds of things still considered legal? because they may not be. So, like in the US, it is possible for you to disinherit a heir, like a child of yours. You can specifically say, "I'm giving my money to these two, but that one over there, I'm not giving any money to them." Is that allowed in this other country? Because there are countries that will not allow you to disinherit a child, adult, otherwise. So you need to make sure that the things that you've said in the not only is the will acceptable in this new country, but the things that you said in that US will, would they apply as well? Okay. And then the other one is, does it make sense to try and make this US will cover what you've done in another country or countries? I don't know how you live in. Maybe you have a summer home in Switzerland and a winter home in Mexico, but then you've got, a place in the US that you go when you're visiting the grandkids. Are you trying to make the US will do too much? So those are 3 of the big questions that you've got to deal with first. Do you mean to tell me everyone who moved abroad left knowing all of this before moving? Absolutely not, they don't. I know they don't, because I don't hear enough conversations about it. And as we've said on this channel before, I'm always like thinking about these kinds of things and how to best prepare for them. I guess being the child who has had to bury a parent and I had to navigate a lot of these things myself, I am working to make it as easy as possible for my own children. And so that has kind of steered some of my decisions about how I live in other countries, excuse me, outside the US. Like, for example, one of the reasons buying property and buying an apartment in Mexico is completely off the table for me is because I know who my children are. And I know that they are not going to go through the hoops that the Mexican legal system has in order to get the property changed over to their name and claim their inheritance and all that. So, me knowing who they are, I'm not gonna go and spend money on assets that they have no interest in ever claiming. So, no, I don't think enough people give this thought, before they go. Life insurance is another one. You do need to make sure that if you bought a US policy, that it is going to cover you in the event that you die while living outside the US. Will it, because some policies do and some don't, and you literally have to find out from your insurer whether or not they cover you. Okay. Um, will requirements vary from state to state and country to country depending on the assets and the property? Yes, it does. And then we haven't even gotten into inheritance laws. And do they recognize the assets in the same way? It can get very complicated. So, like I said, I have made the decision that I am, and it impacts how I move now because I want to make things as simple for them as possible. If I had the kind of children who would be like me, who'd be like, "What? My mama left me a house in Mexico? Sure, I'll go down there. What paperwork do I need to bring?" Those are not my children. So, why why buy property when I know they're not gonna do the things necessary to hold on to it after I'm gone? Um, so yeah. Excuse me, y'all. There is an organization that offers, I'm not gonna say an organization, because I really think they are a law firm, but there are firms that deal with this kind of stuff. That if you're not like me and you like screw them kids, I'm gonna build this wealth and I'm gonna build this network of assets around the world. There are law firms who have this knowledge and will walk you through and help you get things set up. But like I said, I know who my children are. Okay. I see a couple of questions here. Where did I mark it? I see a couple of questions here about, okay, here it is. Auntie Lou asked about it. Can your will also specify how to bring your body back to the States? It can. Mine does, but I would not depend solely on that. I would also have a conversation with your people. Okay, and Janella, including passing abroad and getting your body back to the United States. I have made it very clear what my wishes are, because whatever money there is left, I'm like, why are y'all going to spend that money to get my body back to the US? Cremate me where I am, put me in your carry-on and enjoy the money if if there's any left. But that is something that you should be considering, and that is something that you can put things in place for. Also, I didn't fully understand this, but there are different rules about like what happens when someone dies. We are fairly familiar with what that process is in the United States. Like, oh, okay, the medical examiner or the coroner, depending on the state you live in, and this is the process to get a death certificate, blah, blah, blah. What does that look like in the new country you live in? Okay, because it more likely than not is not going to be the same as it is in the US. Um, if you're interested in what that's like for Mexico, Sonia Diaz, who I think she wrote the book, like, what is that book called? It's like the Move Abroad, Move to Mexico Bible or something like that. She's a very well-known immigration facilitator. She published an article about like when someone dies in Mexico, these are the things you need to know. Um, you need to find those out for the country that you're going to be living in, because it's going to be a problem if you make the assumption that it is the same as it is in the US. Okay. Um, Is there a need for attorneys to handle wills for those who move abroad? Wish there was a directory of those kind of resources. I think we're going to see more of that, because we often talk about, the various, or at least I talk about these things because I used to be a history teacher, the various waves of migration into the US. I think we're entering a stage where we're going to be seeing waves of migrants leave the US. And because these are going to be fairly well off migrants, these particular needs that they have will be met. And so I think we'll see a lot more of that. Okay. Um, okay. Uh, so we were talking about like one, does your US will work in this other country? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. There are a couple of things you need to think about. Um, so does that mean maybe you could be in a situation where you need to have a US will and then you need to have a will for whatever assets you have in this other country? That is quite possible. If you're talking about trust, you definitely need to be talking to a lawyer, one to construct the trust properly, but also if there are foreign assets, like can you put foreign assets in a trust that's created under US law? Depending on your new country, that might work, that might not work. Okay. Um, that is something to think about. I own property, a will versus a trust. A will is very good for saying, This is who I want things to go to. These are my wishes. What a will is not great for is um, facilitating that process. Like a will not help you avoid probate. A trust probably could, but a trust has to be structured in the correct manner. You've got to fund the trust in the correct manner. A trust is not something you can DIY. You definitely should not. So, if you have created a trust in the US and then you have gained these assets that are in another country, that's something to think about is, do I need to change my trust situation or do I need a foreign trust? It could get complicated. So I'm not saying that to discourage anybody. It's just things that you need to think about. That's just stuff you need to think about. Um, didn't someone say they donated their body to science? Both my mother and my grandmother did that, but they both died in the US. I imagine you can do that other places, but I have not looked into it. Okay. There's some good questions in here that I'm marking for us to talk about in just a moment. Okay. When that young girl got killed in Mexico, I think they had to pay like 6K to get her body back. If all they had to pay was $6,000, that's actually that's a bargain because I have heard numbers, double digit numbers easily, easily double digit numbers. So yeah, repatriating a body is not a cheap thing. Um, And if you, the person with the assets that you are hoping to pass on to future generations, if you don't put things in place, your heirs may not have any option other than using some of the money you left behind for them that you were hoping would go toward their future, having to use that to repatriate your body. I don't want that to happen. Um okay. So, okay. The other thing we talked about, the will situation, the trust situation. I mentioned this from my own personal situation. You know, as you are acquiring assets in your new country, to take into consideration your heirs' willingness and their ability to see the process through. My oldest daughter she might think enough to be like, oh, mama left me this house in Mexico, but she also has three small children. How likely is it that she's going to be able to fly to Mexico or fly wherever to go through that process when she also does not speak Spanish? You know? Um, I guess I just realized that this is out of order because we talked about retirement previously, and that's the next thing I have on my list. But before I jump into that, let me see. There was a question I marked. Uh, so once you move abroad, you have to pay for and have a place in the will of a life insurance policy. If you are intending to have life insurance, now we can do a whole separate video about who should have life, who I believe should have life insurance and who should not. Everybody does not need life insurance. Um, so possibly. But like I said, we could have a whole nother conversation about that. Um, Something I struggle with financially while living abroad is lifestyle inflation. You think you will save more, but you get caught up in being able to finally afford stuff and don't save. I don't think there's enough talking about this either. Because this is sort of the other side of that when we were talking about spending like you're on vacation, that you finally got a little space to breathe when it comes to your finances, and maybe things feel a lot more affordable than they were where you used to live. And if you're not making a conscious effort to stay on top of those costs, you can run into lifestyle inflation, and all of the saving you were planning to do all goes out the window. Definitely. All right. So, the other thing that needs to be talked about, and this kind of goes back to when we were talking about like retirement and investing and that sort of thing, is okay. So I think many of the people who watch my videos are like Gen X. We're on the cusp of being able to tap into those retirement accounts. If you're one of the lucky people and you have a pension, maybe you're going to start getting those pension payments next 5, 10 years or so. um, Something to think about is what's going to be your tax situation in your new country. This goes with retirement, but this also goes with inheritance. Um, like in the US, I think the inheritance tax at the federal level is something like you have to leave an estate. It's either $5 million in value or $11 million. Okay, so the vast majority of us are not going to have to pay uh, inheritance tax or that sort of thing. But what about in the country you move to? I can tell you that in a lot of countries, that number is significantly lower, or everybody has to pay some portion of what they inherit. They have to pay a tax on that. So again, this is a good example of don't assume that you only have to worry about the US side of things, as especially if you're talking about being abroad long term. What are the rules in that country? Um, so, like, you have a US based retirement account, you have a Roth IRA, you have a 401k. Will all countries recognize that and the special tax treatment those accounts get? How will they tax you? Um, so, like, think about this, a Roth IRA, the way that works, you contribute after tax money. Uncle Sam says, leave this after tax money invested. Don't take it out of the account until you're 59 and a half. If you're willing to do that, you never have to pay income taxes on any of that money. So, and this is always one of the things I tell people. If there are young folks in your life, please encourage them to open and fund and invest in a Roth IRA. Because think about if you had started putting $6,000 away a year, $6,500 now in 2023, when you were in your early 20s, and you had just invested that into a broad stock market index fund, and it continued to grow and compound over 30 years. At 50, you would be a millionaire. Okay. And what if you never had to pay income taxes, capital gains taxes on that growth? That's what a Roth IRA does, right? If I am in the US and I am over 59 and a half and I start pulling my money out of that Roth, Uncle Sam can't do anything. There are no taxes to collect. But what about in that new country you live in? Do they recognize the tax-free nature of the Roth IRA? Probably not. Okay. Now, uh, if most countries don't recognize Roth IRAs being tax free. So that means, although Uncle Sam won't tax you on the money, if you live in Spain, Spain is going to tax you at their tax rates on that money you're pulling out of your Roth. So, like Belgium, Canada, Estonia, France, Latvia, Lithuania, Malta, and the UK. Those are the only countries that officially say we recognize a Roth IRA and that when you pull that money out, it's tax free. There are some countries that have territorial tax structures that basically, if the income is not earned physically in those countries, they won't tax them. So, like Panama, Nicaragua, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore. If I was retired in one of those countries and I was pulling money out of my Roth IRA, they would not tax me. But pretty much everybody else is probably going to tax you in some way, shape, or form. So it would behoove you to understand, how are they going to tax that? Are they going to tax that as capital gains? Are they going to tax that as regular income? Will that be included with, like, will they tax my pension? Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. That's something to know. Okay. Um, there are some low tax countries, or countries that might give you a break. So, like a lot of the Caribbean countries kind of have lower income taxes. The Middle East, they don't have, Middle East countries that have oil wealth, they don't have income taxes. Portugal might not be a bad place to be because they have a non-habitual resident tax program, which they basically will give you a break on taxing your retirement money for a while. They'll tax it at a discounted rate for a while. Um, but yeah, it could be, don't make the assumption that how your retirement money is taxed in the US is how it's going to be taxed in your new country. So that is something else to consider. Um, Definitely. Basically, somebody gonna get some of your coins one way or another. There is a reason they say that there are two certainties in life: death and taxes. Okay, there is a reason they say that. Um, there are some choices though that you can make. Now, I personally don't believe you should let the tail wag the dog. Don't let your fear of being taxed like drive where how you move. But I do think it is at least smart to be aware of, might there be some place that's a little bit more advantageous tax wise, or might there be some choices I can make that might mitigate some of the tax issues or tax taxes I might have to pay. So that's so you can see these are a variety of possible pitfalls that we might have to deal with. Those of us who plan on being outside the US for a while. Um, I'm looking at y'all's comments. If you're a resident in another country outside, leave your monies. um, I it's more of, I don't wanna see people get surprised because, a lot of people don't think about the fact that even if you stay in the US, all that money you stashed in your 401k, you're gonna have to pay taxes on it. You were able to contribute to that 401k pre-tax, but Uncle Sam is gonna get his money. He's gonna get it when you withdraw. And if you're thinking, that's all right, I got enough money, I got like rental income and I have my Roth IRA, I won't pull that money out of the IRA, out of the 401k. I'll just pass that on to my heirs. Absolutely, you won't, because of required minimum distributions. Uncle Sam will get his money. So it's more of, I don't want people to be surprised. I want people to be thinking about these things and having these conversations so that there's less of that. Oh, I didn't know. It caught me off guard. Okay. Talk about do what you gotta do so that you don't ever have to return to the US. It's worth it. That is my plan. That is my plan. Okay. Um, Sounds like we might have to do feet pics or strip to bring in some ghost money outside the US. Remember, always remember that as long as you have a US passport, Uncle Sam wants to tax your worldwide income. Can you put money into a retirement account while you live abroad? Do you mean like you had a Roth IRA in the US? Can you continue to contribute to that? I live abroad and I don't even have a retirement account. And how can I start saving? Okay, so you can you can invest in the US stock market no matter where you live. Okay. Now, how you choose to do that could have different consequences. If you want to do that in a taxable brokerage account, you absolutely can. I highly recommend that you open that brokerage account before you leave the US. That is one of the things I mention on my Move Abroad checklist. Let's say that you had a Roth IRA that you were contributing to. By the way, did y'all know that that IRA contributions increased for 2023? If you are under 50, you can contribute $6,500 a year. If you are over 50, you can contribute $7,500 a year. Now, here's the thing about contributing to an IRA. You have to have earned income. So, remember when we were talking about the foreign earned income exclusion, FEIE? If you exempt all of your income with FEIE because you don't want to pay any federal income taxes, that means you've had zero earned income. And guess what you can't do? Contribute to an IRA. There are some people who earn so much money that they still have income that goes above what can be exempted. If that's the case, yes, you can contribute to an IRA. There are some people who choose to exempt only a portion of what they are allowed to, and that they will pay taxes on some of the other incomes so that they can contribute to the IRA. There are a variety of ways to approach it, but that does have an impact. Um, Brokerage account recommendations, Vanguard or Fidelity, six in one hand, half a dozen in another. Vanguard is great, Fidelity is great. But I will say that if you would really like to access things through a website or an app that's user friendly, that's probably not Vanguard. But Vanguard is great. If you don't care that the app or the website's a little clunky, it's fine. It's great. It's great. So, can I asked y'all earlier if anybody else had any like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Vanguard not being friendly? The user interface on their website, you don't find it to be clunky? I'm talking to Rashida in case y'all are like, who's she talking to? You are like the only person I have ever heard say they didn't think the website was horrible. Okay. So I have been corrected. Rashida thinks it's great. She thinks their website is fabulous. So there you go. Charles Schwab is another one. Hey, I'm just telling you what people have told me and my personal experience, but I haven't been with Vanguard in more than a decade. So maybe things have improved. Um, so I asked earlier if y'all could think of any kind of financial hiccups that you've had, um, that you wanted to share that maybe I didn't hit on my list. See? See? I knew it wasn't just me. I knew it. I knew it. Okay. So, I don't know. Did I miss anything um that y'all can think of? I don't know. I don't know. Okay. So like I said, y'all, the big discount brokers, Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, TD Ameritrade, six in one hand, half a dozen in another. Go with the one that makes you feel better. It's not a life or death choice. I see there are several comments here. Uh, So claim the exemption, eliminate the deduction on federal taxes rather than getting money back. Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. Remember what I said, y'all, about I am not licensed to give anybody tax advice? Remember that? I can't answer this question. I don't think I know enough to answer that question. Okay. uh I see there are several folks asking about our little storage adventure here. Yes, Rashida is emptying her storage, and I am here to help. That's kind of some of the, no, well, that's not hers, but that's some of the stuff. That pile of stuff, that is hers. That is what we're doing, and yes, I'm being treated very well. I am, and I hope that I am, delivering on the job that I came here to do. So yeah, we're making progress. So yay, yay for Rashida. Things are going well. Yeah. All right, guys. I think, okay, I see one more question and then we will wrap this up. F Doctor says, just remember, does it spark joy? You gonna get me cussed at. Okay. I thought I saw a question. Okay. So if you can't contribute to the IRA, then a taxable brokerage account would be the best way to start saving for retirement. Yes, yes. The only difference is you don't get like a IRA or a 401k, 403b, 457. They are all tax advantaged or tax free in some way. Your brokerage account, you could at some point have to, depending on the circumstance, have to pay capital gains tax. But yes, that is what many of the people who claim the FEIE, they do. They save for retirement using a taxable brokerage account. That is perfectly acceptable. Okay. Quinn, it's not hers, but is there some of her stuff in there? Yes, but we won't talk about that right now. We're handling this one right now. Okay. I think I found it today, but we didn't bring it back with us because the truck was already full. But I think based on the package I could feel, I do think that I found this today. Um, There is, if you go to my Instagram, there is a picture of one of the things she found today that she was very excited about. So, okay. All right, y'all. I actually have to get back to making my spreadsheet and figuring out where some of these things are going to go. Um, like I said, if you want to be on the wait list and be notified the next time that I offer the Get Started Investing Challenge, um, there is a link in the description, but you can go to where I host all my courses on Thinkific, pickygirltravels.thinkific.com, and you can sign up and get on there. We talked about the move abroad checklist. If by chance you feel like you could benefit from a one-on-one call with me, those are available. You can book those at bit.ly/askadelia. And I just realized I don't have, I'm trying to type with one hand while I hold my tiny microphone with the other one. So forgive me, y'all. This is not easy to do. If um, um, I'm I can't type and talk and hold my tiny mic all at the same time. I am not that good. Okay. So, if you are interested in maybe like making over your whole life, really going after the things that you want. Remember, that's one of the things that I am dedicated to helping Black women do is to live life on their terms. If you want to do that, I think Reclaim the Retreat might be a great place for you. Ivana Robinson and myself are hosting two retreats. We're hosting one in March and we're hosting one in November. If you want more about that, go to this website and request all the details, and you can find out everything. And maybe sometime later this week we'll go live and talk a little bit more about that. Ivana is in uh, she's in Puerto Rico and I'm in California, so us trying to coordinate schedules has been a little tricky. So yeah. So yeah. Okay. So that's all I got for tonight, y'all. Thanks for sticking with me despite the technical difficulties we had, as well as my lighting situation here. Um, so yeah, yes, yes. El Salvador, the retreat is in El Salvador. There is one in March. There is one in November. And yeah, you can go to the website, reclaimtheretreat.com. You put in your email address and they send you the itinerary and all the details. And I'm not sure that that email will include the March date, but yes, there is a March as well as a November date for the retreat. Thank y'all for hanging with me tonight. Take care, enjoy your Wednesday, and I will see y'all a little later this week. Bye.